Saul. Good. Hi. How are you? Okay. We are going to be finishing Gemara Pesachim. So appropriate at this time of the year, right? Okay. Just a quick intro, and then we'll move right into the Gemara. We've seen throughout Masechet Pesachim the idea that it talked about the timing of bringing the Korban. We see that it talked about the differences between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. Okay, the 14th of Nisan and the 14th of Iyar. We saw it dealt with a whole variety of questions regarding the need for registration. And ultimately, the Gemara eventually moved us to the point of discussing the Seder itself. When the animal was to be taken, when the animal is to be slaughtered, what's to be done with the slaughtering, and then ultimately with the eating, and so on and so forth. So as we got through Arvei Pesachim, the last parak, we began to see here too that not only do we find many of the common sections that we have in the Haggadah that are referred to, but at the same time it carries us into some other areas as well. Okay, among those areas, okay, are the various sections of the Haggadah. It gives a basis to why they're included, right? So one could use that on the Seder night as part of their remarks, okay? But at the same time, the Arvei Pesachim, the last parak, deals with a question of a Mishnah that talks about the order of blessings. What blessing takes precedence? What blessing is more important? The Mishnah compares the example between eating the Korban Pesach and eating the Korban Chagiga. Are both those blessings equal and so they're separate, or does one include the other? Based on a machloket between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. Excuse me. Okay. Now, as we finished this morning's daf, we went up to Kaf Aleph, the bottom of the Inyan, the bottom of that page. Okay. That's where we finished off. Okay. But we're now going to try to finish up the section that's located on Kaf Aleph Amud Beis, and that's the connection with the discussion in the Mishnah. We have a situation presented where we have different blessings that are supposed to be recited. Okay, and can we say that one blessing takes precedence over another, or do we say something different? Okay, so that's where we are going to start. I'm just watching, one of our chaverim is just coming in. Okay, all right. Okay, so the Gemara starts off Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph, and okay, the following. Rabbi Simlai Ikla Lepidyon Haben. Rabbi Simlai came to the occasion of a Pidyon Haben. Baumine, and the people in attendance asked him the following shaila. Pshita, al Pidyon Haben. It's obvious that in regards to reciting the blessing of Pidyon Haben itself, namely Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Pidyon Haben, on that particular blessing, Avi Haben Mevarech, the father of the child, okay, says the blessing, right? Clearly, he's the one who is benefiting in that situation, and so he's fulfilling the mitzvah, and so therefore that's clear why he would recite it. But, says the Gemara, there is another blessing also recited at the Pidyon Haben. Baruch shechianu v'kiyamanu v'gianu lazman hazeh. that blessing. Okay? The Shechianu blessing. Kohen Mevarech or Avia Ben Mevarech. So the Gemara asks, who recites that blessing? Is it the Kohen that recites the Shechianu blessing, or is it the father? Why? The answer could be given, as some Meforshim suggest, maybe the Kohen, because he's going to get the 5 silver pieces. So he's going to gain. Okay? On the other hand, maybe it still should be the father, because again, the father is the one who's doing the mitzvah, and so therefore he's benefiting. Okay? So on the Gemara continues, further examining the question. Kohen mevarech, perhaps we're going to say that the Kohen says the blessing of Shechianu dekamte hana ali day, because he's the one who's going to benefit from it. He gets the actual money. Okay, he got to keep the 5 silver, right? Or Avia ben mevarech, or perhaps it's the father of the child says the blessing. Deka avid mitzvah, because he's the one who's actually doing the mitzvah. Okay? So Gemara comes forward and tells us an interesting insight. Remember, this was a shaila asked to Rabbi Simlai, and the Gemara now tells us, Lo hava biyadeh. He didn't have an answer ready for them. It wasn't handy for him to give an answer. Ata she'il be midrasha. He went later that day back to the base midrash and raised the question. Okay? Amrule, they said to him, Avi haben mevarech shtayim, that the father says 2 blessings, namely both the blessing al pidyon ben as well as the blessing of Shechianu. V'hilchata avi haben mevarech shtayim. And the law is, okay, that the law being that the decision according to the Gemara and the base midrash, therefore, was that the father makes both blessings. And that's what we practice. Adran alach arve Pesachim, uslik alach Masechet Pesachim. Okay, so here we complete Masechet Pesachim now, and we look forward to, God willing, we'll all be around in another number of years to go through it again. Okay, but we look forward to starting Shkalim tomorrow. But first, we're going to ask Dr. Jack Prince to lead the Hadran. I have Hadran sheets for those that would like to follow if you don't have the mark.
I have to talk to the computer?
Yeah.
Oh, so I gotta sit. Okay. Can't see. Ready? Adonai Masechet Pesachim, Adonai Alon, Daitan Allah Masechet Pesachim, Daitan Alon, Lon Snashim Minach Masechet Pesachim, Lon Snashim Minon, Lo B'Yom Ha'Dain, Lo B'Yom Ha'Diyosem. Yiratzon F'necha Adonai Leheinu Lehi V'Seinu Shetehei Sadosko V'Naseinu B'Olam Hazeh V'Sei Imonu L'Yodam Haba Kanina B'Papa Rami B'Papa Nachum B'Papa Achoi B'Papa Abba Mori B'Papa Rafim B'Papa Rokish B'Papa Surko B'Papa Ado B'Papa Doru B'Papa Arab No Adonai Leheinu Divrei Sadosko B'Finu B'Fios Amka Beis Yisrael V'Niekun Anachim V'Teretzoreinu 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 Amcha Beis Yisrael, Koloni Yodi Shemecha, Londish Avasecha Lishmo, Me'oi Vaytech HaKmenim, V'Tosecha, Kiriolam Hibi, Yihili B'Tomim B'Kukecha, L'Manlo Evosh, T'Yodom Ha'eshka P'Kudecha, K'Yibom K'Yisoni, Baruch Atah Adonai L'Amdeinu, Kukecha, Amen, 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 Celebrate. Modem Menachem F'Necha Adonai L'Heinu V'Hei Avoseinu, Shesamte Kolkenim Yoshi Beis HaMidrash, Samte Kolkenim Yoshi Kronos, She'onim Mashkim V'Hei Mashkim, Onim Mashkim L'Divrei Sorah V'Hei Mashkim L'Dvorim B'Telem, Onu amelim ve'heim amelim. Onu amelim in kalim ska, ve'heim amelim ve'enim kalim ska. Onu rotzim ve'heim rotzim. Onu rotzim l'chai olam habo, ve'heim rotzim l'ver shachas shenema. Yato lehim to redeem l'ver shachas, anshe domim u'mimo, v'yechasu yemehem, v'ani yeftabo. Yirtzim v'neko Adonai Elohai b'shem, Kashen as a ton of the same, the Sechus Sochim King Zarkler, as rain la Haskil, the Saktos, the Spor Makain, the Simon, Luno Laminish Velas, the kindness called Divi Samat or Sech Biaba, the Skus Kola Tanoim, the Amaroim, the Samideka, Kakamim Yamo Li, the Zari, Shados, Soma Shato, Mi Pi Zari, the Zerazari, Ad Olam. The sky in be this alecha ko tanka osok b'shafu kodishma alecha lakitzos isicheko kiri yebe yomecha v'yosifu l'kosh navskayim orech yomi mino v'smola oshe v'chobo Adonai oz yamo yitain Adonai yivarek as amo b'shalom. Yiskader shemei dabo Yomi diyu osim v'yiskader toso Olachiyo bisayo Odiasoko yosom l'chai omo Olivnei karto di Yerushalayim Ulishach ochlo heklo V'gavei l'makab hokona nikro min ara V'la'asobo hokona di shemayo li'asrei V'yamba kutra b'richu v'malchusei v'korei v'chayekona v'yomekona v'chayekol beis Yisrael ba'agalo isman korib v'yimlu amen. Hey shmei rabon v'rach v'yolam yameo mayoh Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yispaer v'yisman yisnasei v'yishadav v'salev v'salol shmei v'kudisho b'richu v'yilom mekol b'kosov v'shiroso tush b'kosov v'nechem oso da'amilom v'yomo v'yimlu amen. Al Yisrael, Barabon, Bial Tamidei Home, Kol Tamidei Samidei Home, Yaakov and the Yoskin, the Edaisi, the Yasser Dain, the Bakol Asa, Asa, the Elahon, Kocham Barabakino, the Kit of the Rakov, and the Dickens and the Bigay, who for Konam and Kodam Abu and the Vishmaya, the Imlu Amen, the Haishlam and Shemai, Bakayim Olain, Valko Yisrael, the Imlu Amen. Shalom and Amov, who Barakov Yasser Shalom Olainu, Yalko Yisrael, the Imlu Amen. Mazel tov, Mazel tov.
Simita ben Mazel tov, Simita ben Mazel tov, Simita ben Mazel tov. Yehelon, Yehelon, Olachai Yisrael. Yehelon, Olachai Yisrael.
Okay, we're going to ask everybody sit down. I'm going to please ask Rabbi Moshe Kranzler to start us in Shkalim.
Gotta give out samples. Samples from, that's it.
Did you find the property on Scullen yet, or they still?
No, I'm still looking for it. Oh, I need my cap. I can't even see that. Hold on.
Is this one?
I have to start with a apology. I was asked by Rabbi Green to prepare the beginning of the Gemara Shkolim, to introduce the Gemara at this point, and unfortunately, until middle of last night, I was sick, very sick, and I couldn't do it until prepare myself until the middle of the night and some this morning. So please forgive me if it's not going to be as good as I'd like it to be. Hopefully, it'll come across enough so you'll understand what the whole Gemara of Shkolim is all about. As many of you know, the shekel that we're discussing, the title Shkolim is talking about the Hefer shekel that was used, that was given every year into the temple. And the first reference to it is in Kisiso, Parshas Kisiso, where we start with Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor, kisi soas rosbene soas go the hem das nu ish kof nafsho la adushem bifkoda sam velo ye negav bifkoda sam. First, I introduced to the whole concept of the Chatzi Shekel in Kisiso, when the Jewish people are asked to donate a half a shekel. And by the way, we refer to it now as a shekel because they made a coin out of that half a shekel that was referred to as a shekel. So they were supposed to give a shekel in order to make sure that they were able to get an accurate account of the Jewish people at the time, because they were not allowed to count, by numbers, individuals, because of the plagues that followed each time they took a census. So the result was that in the future they counted the Jewish people by each person being responsible to give a shekel, and that way they had an ideal count. Not only that, it was used not only for the purpose of census, but it was also used for the purpose of communal offerings. In other words, every Shabbos there was a special korban. There was the korban tamid brought in the morning, the korban tamid in the afternoon. Then there were other special communal type of offerings which were not given by individuals, but that was so the Chatzi Shekel was used for that purpose as well. Actually, the question was asked here before: did you find a shkolim, a Gemara shkolim in Bavli? We still haven't found a Gemara shkolim in Bavli. Why do I say that? Because shkolim itself was never part of Bavli. Shkolim was always a part of Yerushalmi. Why was let's take a look at the content of shkolim. Shkolim, the first part is talking about the Chatzi Shekel primarily. The second part is talking about the different parts of the Beis Hamikdash and what they were used for, etc. So ideally, that should have been in the part of the of Gemaras which deals with Kachim. Why isn't it put into Kachim, even though it's in the Bavli? Because the reason was because the shekel was given at a certain time of the year. It was always had to be given in Ador, and because Ador is close to Pesach, so therefore was put into a state of Moed, which deals with specific holidays that come at certain specific times, and therefore we find it now in Moed, and that's one of the reasons why we are going to learn it now right after Pesach. But they never created a shkolim for Talmud Bavli, and it has become part of our Seder of Bavli. And anybody who goes through Shas has to study shkolim to complete to make a Siyum. It's accepted as part of it. Anyway, let me go further. There are a certain number of interesting points to be made about shkolim before we start the Mishnah. First of all, it has to be. One of the reasons why we give it every year is because of a specific pasuk that we read every Rosh Chodesh. Part of the Rosh Chodesh laning is Zos Olas Chodesh B'Chadsho L'Chodshei Hashanah. This is the Ola of each month in its renewal for the months of the year. And the sages and the Rabbana understood this to mean renew the sacrificial service once a year by bringing the communal offerings from shkolim newly collected for that year. In other words, if we have any kind of communal offerings that had to be brought, you had to bring them from the new shkolim. You could not go to the old shkolim that from last year. You had to take from the new shkolim that were gathered during the month of Adar. We'll talk a little bit more later how we gathered the shkolim and how we got them together. Who is supposed to pay the shekel? All Jewish men are required to pay the shekel, whether they're Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, whether they are Gerim, or whether they are freed slaves. The women and children are exempt, but everybody else is chayv to go ahead and make sure that they give the shekel. As I said earlier, the shekel fund was used, besides being used as a census, as a way of counting the Jewish people, it also paid for the temple offerings that were communal offerings. And there was one other temple account that was called the Bedek Habayis, which had nothing to do with this. It was a separate account, and that separate account was used also for fixing things in the Beis Hamikdash, and that came only from voluntary offerings. In other words, basically there was no need nobody was fined or nobody was actually told that they have to give it. That was a voluntary offering that was given to the Bedek Abayis, and many people offered, even if they offered animals, they were sold, and the money that was put into the Bedek Abayis used for the purpose of upkeep of the temple. Now, how did they collect? How they collect this Chatzi shekel? It was a responsibility of everybody, but you know that volunteers don't necessarily bring the offerings. So what happened is that they had two ways. One of them, in each community, there was a major announcement that was made about bringing the Chatzi shekel, to a central gathering place, and everybody, I would say the majority of the people realized that this is very important, and they brought it. But there were many laggards. There were many people who didn't. So they had people who were collectors, and they used to go ahead and go after those people. They had records, I guess. They used to go after all those people that didn't bring it, and they used to, if they didn't give it, they used to either fine them or they used to even take their property, sell it in order just to get that Chatzi shekel. So nobody got away. They had a system, so nobody got away with it. It's interesting. Everybody had, because they felt it was so important to get that Chatzi shekel, as I say, for several purposes, that they literally went after them, and they did not let anybody get away with it. That was not only limited to Eretz Yisrael, but it was any Jew in any community they lived, whether they lived in Eretz Yisrael or in Chutz La'aretz, every Jew was responsible to give it no matter where they lived. Okay. If you take a look at the Gemara, you're going to see that your favorite Rashi on one side and Tosas on the other side, it's not there. You have different commentaries, and let me mention the commentaries that are given or quoted in the Shkolim. One is the Riva Van, who is Rabbi Yehuda ben Yamin Rishon, who a chief rabbi of Rome in the 13th century. Then you have another Pirush Korban Ha'edah, was written by Reb David Frankel of Dessau, who was rabbi of Berlin in the 18th century. Then you had the Tiklin Chadatin, which, by the way, is the most popular one of all. That's the one like similar to a Rashi that we have in the Bavli. And Mishnas Eliyahu by Rabbi Yisrael of Shklov, a disciple of the Gra, whose work relies extensively and elaborates on the Gra himself. Okay, those are the Meforshim that you're going to find here in this Masechta. Now we're going to start the Masechta on, the first page, first Mishnah. Be'echad be'ador, hashmim ala shkolim ala koloim. On the first day of Adar, as I mentioned earlier before, the collection took place on Adar, not before, only on Adar. So the Bezdin used to go ahead and make a proclamation, and regarding the giving of the shekel, regarding the payment of the shekel, and also in addition to that, they made another announcement regarding kilaim. As you know, kilaim is when we mix two different seeds together, and so there's an is of kilaim. Again, it's one of the chukim that we really don't have an answer for why, what, and when. But basically, kilaim is a lav that was very strictly observed. We observe it in many different forms today, like in shatnez and so forth. But kilaim was always observed, and it was announced. They announced also regarding kilaim. What they announced, I will discuss a little bit later when we get into specifics. And then also on the Chamisha Osabo, on the 15th day of Adar, they made several other announcements. Only one of them actually applies to what we just said earlier. On the 15th day of Adar, the following events took place. First of all, Korines HaMegillah Bakrachim. They used to read the Megillah in the walled cities. As you know, even today in the walled cities from the times of Yeshua, we learn the Megillah today on the 15th day, instead of the 14th day. And basically that goes back to the times of Yeshua, because Yeshua was the first one who captured all these cities in Eretz Yisrael. So they they use the cover of the walled cities in the name of Yehoshua. So basically they used to go ahead and announce the fact that they have to read the Megillah on the 15th day. Umisaknin is hadrochim is horchovos. They began to repair the roads and the streets. Now, drochim and chovos, one of what's the difference between the two? One of them is considered the major thoroughfares like Broadway or Ocean Parkway, etc., and the other one's considered the side streets. Which one is which? There's a machlokas. So one of the says one says Rehovos is the major one. One says the Drochim as the major one. It's not important, but they went ahead and they began to repair the streets. Why did they repair the streets? Because during the winter season, these roads became became in disrepair. And what happened is, in order for people to be able to travel on them, they made sure that these roads were repaired. And one of the specific reasons is because the people, we had the people who killed someone b'shoking, they had to go to Ora Miklot. They had to flee from the people who were after them because they were able to go ahead and catch them and really kill them. So therefore, these people had to find a way to get to the Ora Miklot as soon as they are able to. In order to make sure to make it easier for them, the roads had to be paved and cleared. So these people had the chance to save their lives on the way to the Ora Miklot. Okay, ve'es mikvaos hamayim. And in those days, not everybody had a regular mikvah that we, regular built mikvah like we have today. They had mikvahs all over the place. How do they have mikvahs? If they had a open or a deep ravine, or they had a opening that was deep enough a pit or something, and they had enough room for the 40 saw that had to go in, water that had to go in there, they used to designate that as a mikvah. So basically what they did, but what happened is because all these mikvahs were all over, out in the open, all the weather had an effect, they gathered a lot of dirt and other things, and so they, during this period of time, they cleaned all the mikvahs, so that when the especially when the Kohanim needed them or other people needed them because they needed them on a regular basis, they were able to find a clean mikvah near them. They attended all the public needs. Now, the notes say that this is going to be discussed later on in the parak, and they don't mention at all at this point what the public needs are. Umitzayonim hakvoros, they used to mark the graves. Now, again, we didn't have regular cemeteries in those days, and sometimes there were people buried all over the place. So they used to put lime markers near the kvarim, so the Kohanim should know that they can't go close to these kvarim. They used to use limestone. They said they used limestone because, because of it looked gray, was able to see it more readily and identify it. But they used to clean off these stones so that the Kohanim should have a clear view that this is a keva, and then they have to stay away and they shouldn't get close to it. So that was also done during the same period. I guess that was a big job for the sanitation department, or whoever took care of all the cleaning and everything else. The month of Adar was a very big month for them. So they used to go out basically and clean up all these gravestones. V'yotzin af ala kelayim. This Yotzim ala kelayim is the only point that has a connection to what was said earlier. Basically, what do you mean the Yotzim ala kelayim? The kelayim, as I mentioned before, was a lav. But what is kelayim? Beside it was a mixture of two different kinds of seeds or various things that you couldn't or grow together. And the measurement was if it was more than 1/24th of the other seed. If it was more than 1/24th, it's oivan kalaim. So basically, you could have had a mixture up to 1/24th of the other seed. If you had anything more, then automatically it was kalaim. So they went out. They used to go out in this month, and they used to send inspectors around to different fields to make sure that if there was any field that there was close to becoming kalayim, they had to make sure they had to clear out these fields and to make sure that there was no kalayim because it was such a major love. And that's the end of the Mishnayos.
Thank you, Rabbi Kranzler.
Yes.
Don't say you didn't prepare well enough.
Excuse me.
Good.